Oh, it's like your index.html, or as we're going to see, it's going to be Python scripts or whatever the heck. It's just going to do a bunch of code for you. And then after writing all that code, okay, its context is now really biased towards the way that it wrote that code. Basically, if you think about it, there's like 10,000 tokens, and all of those tokens are like, hey, I should write the code this way because of whatever reason. Well, if you want it to write really, really good code, a lot of the time what you have to do is you actually have to give it to another version of itself with no context, and then just say, hey, this is the code. Knowing absolutely nothing, do you think this is good code? And if the answer to that question is yes, then obviously it's good code. But if not, okay, what usually happens is when you do this, when you spawn a new agent and then give it the code, it'll say, it's kind of weird that you wrote it that way. Why did you write it that way? And then the reason why is because the initial version of Claude, as mentioned, was just really biased because it had just done all this thinking and stuff like that. And so, they do this in like big enterprise and stuff like that. Like you do what's called a code review where, a programmer writes some big, long function or some cool tool or creates a nice app. And then they're so biased about the way to do things because they've just spent like 10 hours, hammering a particular method or a particular approach, that when they give it to a code reviewer, okay, another human being, the guy looks at it and he's like, what the hell is this? Why did you do it this way? You could have done it way easier with another way or whatever. Or, hey, I noticed that your security is kind of off. So in this instance, what the reviewer subagent does is it basically takes advantage of the fact that it has no input, and then it's able to look at the code with like a totally blank face. And so with this, you basically say, look at the code with zero context or no context and break down plus improve it. And then what it'll do is it'll take all of the code. So it might feed in, like 10,000 lines or something, and then it'll return just the changes to the parent agent. And then, this might be, again, like 2K tokens or something. And the parent agent will do the changes because it's usually smarter. And then, now your code's way higher quality. Finally, one that a lot of people are using is sort of this middle one here, which is like QA/testing. Now, this is more of like an advanced programming thing, but basically, in order to determine whether or not a piece of code works or a tool works or a piece of software is like good, typically you can develop a bunch of tests and then you can subject your tool or software that you just created to these tests to figure it out. Now, obviously your parent agent can do this, but this is just something that would pollute the context and be tremendously costly, both in terms of tokens, but also the intelligence of the parent model. And so typically what people do is they'll break things down into this research subagent, a reviewer subagent, and then also some sort of QA or automated test subagent in big enterprise. And that's how they do like automated testing of their code, automated test-driven development, and so on and so forth, which is similar to what I was doing earlier when we designed those websites, where, we tell it to do the thing, it goes and it does the thing, and then it uses some sort of way to verify that it did the thing correctly. You can kind of think of the QA agent as like a way to facilitate that. It's just with design, it's pretty easy because you just feed a screenshot in and then you look at, the screenshot. And if the screenshot's good, then you're good. With, back-end development, obviously you need a way to determine, hey, is the thing that I said that it should be able to do actually happening? Last but not least, we have skills, which were previously referred to as custom/commands. Now, skills are pretty great. Skills basically allow you to automate a vast majority of, I want to say, like the day-to-day knowledge work that you may or may not be doing, especially when you pair it with tools like Excel or Google Sheets or whatnot. Now, I came up with this idea of directive orchestration executions. It was this framework that I put probably about like 4 or 5 months ago, just as Claude was figuring out how skills worked and stuff like that. And they've since created skills, which I think is actually a much better alternative to my DOE framework. So I just use skills now. But basically what these things are just like subagents. These are high-level instructions that you can give to the parent agent, okay? The one distinction between subagent and then skills is in the subagent, it does it all with like a different agent. In the skill, it's like given to the parent agent. And basically it's just a list of instructions that allows it to do something. So I want to give you guys a brief little example of what that might actually look like using a skill that I developed called Shop Amazon. So heading back to our folder here, if I go down to skills, you see that there's now a skill called shop-amazon.md. Up at the top right-hand corner, the name is Shop Amazon. Underneath here is browse and purchase items on Amazon.ca via the Chrome DevTools MCP, using the user as to find, compare, or buy products in Amazon. Then there are a bunch of high-level instructions about how exactly to use some various tools to browse Amazon for me and then find products that I want to do, including stop, like get purchase approval. Do not skip this step. So, I mean, like I often buy products on Amazon, and to be honest, there's just so much junk on Amazon now that I don't want to have to spend every, day, hours of my time, like rifling through mostly, like SEO optimized garbage, which doesn't actually mean anything. So what I did is I put together a skill to do that for me. And at the moment, I require something to connect basically in photography, like a bounce sheet or a reflector with one of my stands. So what I want to do is I'm going to speak into it. And I'm going to say, hey, I'm shopping for something to connect one of my reflectors to one of my tripod mounts. I purchased the reflector a couple days ago, and I didn't realize that I needed, something separate to kind of clip the two together. Could you shop Amazon and give me some options that I could use? So I'm just going to press enter here, and then I'm just going to let it go on its way. We open up the thinking. What it's going to start with is the user is asking me to help them shop on Amazon. Then the user wants to find a reflector holder or whatever. And now what it's going to do is actually going to open up a Chrome tab for me using Chrome DevTools. And it's going to go and it's going to look for it. Okay. Now it knows that I'm in Canada, for instance. So it's actually looking it up at amazon.ca up here. It's scrolling through. It's going to open things up, take screenshots of various parts of the page. It's going to read through everything and so on and so forth. And it'll actually, at the end of it, get me a bunch of options according to what I wrote in my, shop-Amazon markdown skill. And so if you think about it, like this is something that previously a virtual assistant or something might have done, right? I mean, this is something that I would have just given to somebody and delegated away. Hey, I'm setting up a photography studio in X, Y, and Z. Well, now I can actually just write a skill, a high-level skill that teaches it how to use Amazon. And then once it goes through Amazon and, finds me the products, then just gives me like a big list of things like this. So what I can do now is I could say, hey, I want to buy X, Y, and Z, and then it can go and actually buy it for me. Obviously, I recommend if you guys are like making purchase decisions with Claude Code, this isn't really something I'd 100% automate. Maybe I'd have it add all the products to cart and then I'd say, okay, give me the page so I can review it and then purchase it myself. But you can automate this about as crazily in detailed as you want. What we've done is we basically made an API out of Amazon, and they don't have one specifically because they don't want everybody to. With Claude Skills, you can do something like that super easily. The variety of other skills that you can create, this one's called Upwork Scrape Apply. I have a bunch that do lead scraping for me more generally. I have skills that automate the process of sending welcome emails to new clients. I have skills that automate the process of building their deliverables. And what's really cool is you're not the only person that you don't actually have to put the whole skill together yourself. You can just have Claude help you put the skill together for a future instance of Claude. And in practice, that's usually what I do. I'll say something like, hey, I want to build a skill that does X, Y, and Z. Can you help me format it? Here's how skills work, because sometimes it won't know for whatever reason. It'll have to go research skill formatting and stuff like that. And then it'll say, yeah, sure, I could put one together for you. Then what you do is you take that, feed that to a fresh instance of Claude Code that has no understanding what the skill is, see how it does. If it screws up, you just give it feedback and say, okay, modify the skill so that you do better next time. You rinse and repeat, and eventually you get an error rating, which may start off at let's say it's only good 70% of the time on your first. Well, after some changes, now it's good 80% of the time. Then after a couple more changes, now it's good 90% of the time. And then eventually, I want to say you can get to 98 to 99% fidelity and accuracy, which in any sort of knowledge field nowadays is more than enough. I'd say most human beings screw up more than 1 to 2% of the time. So we'll cover a little bit more about skills and how to create them, how to take pre-existing SOPs and workflows and stuff like that and convert them into skills a little bit later on. But for now, just know that they're there. Okay, so most everything here has now been covered. We talked about Claude. We've talked about the Claude.md. We've talked about the local. We talked about the agents folder, the skills folder, the rules folder. We only have a few things left, like there's MCPs to talk about, but now's not a good time to, so I'm going to push that off to later. And then also the settings.json is a good thing to mention, but since this deals with hooks, I'll also talk about that later. You're now at the point where you understand, I want to say, 90% of the internal workings of Claude Code. You understand the file structure, the organization. You understand the highest ROI way to build anything, whether it is a simple website or something more complex like a full stack app or an automation. From here on out, it's really just learning a little bit more about Claude's various modes. So plan mode, dangerously skip permissions, ask before editing, and so on and so forth. And then we can take all this and then we can use it to build something really, really cool. What we're going to learn about next are the various permission modes available to us in Claude Code. Now, just so we're all on the same page here, when I say permission mode, what I'm referring to is this little button down at the very bottom of the GUI. And you can toggle through this button pretty straightforwardly and easily. And as you can see here, when we do, we get 4 main modes. The first is ask before edits. The second is edit automatically. The third is plan mode. And the fourth is bypass permissions. I should note that you're not actually going to get bypass permissions right out of the gate here, at least not as of the time of this recording. So I'll show you guys how to enable that yourselves. So we're going to run through each of these as well as some extras. And then at the end of today's module, we're going to focus significantly more on plan mode. I'm going to walk you guys through how plan mode works, why you might want to use it, and then ultimately how to use plan mode to build something that I've personally been wanting to build for quite a while. So we're going to do it interactively together. So permission modes control how your agents handle permissions. You also give the current permission mode to any sub-agents that you employ, which is going to be pretty important for later. Now, they tend to inherit the permission context from the main conversation, but there are a couple situations in which they can actually override the mode too. For now, I just want you to pretend that all we're talking about are our current top-level agents. We're not focused on any sub-agents or any additional functionality, nothing like what we just talked about earlier. So we have default. Default is standard permission checking with prompts. If you guys remember down here where it says ask before edits, you guys can think of this as basically the default. Okay. And so the default setting is before Claude makes any changes to any files on your computer, it has to ask you whether or not it's okay to do it. And I'll show you guys what that looks like right now by saying, change the title of the project to Nick's Happy Fun Time. So because I'm in ask before edits mode, you'll see that before it does any sort of change, what it's going to do is it's first going to look at the specific file that defines the title. It's going to pop open on the right-hand side the exact section of the page that it's considering updating. So initially it said profile name dash work log. Profile name in this case was Nick. It defined some really cool badass variable stuff for me. But because of my dumb request, it's now saying title equals Nick's Happy Fun Time in lowercase. You'll also notice, I'm just going to have to remove my head here so that we can see this a little bit better. You'll also notice that down at the bottom it says, hey, should we make this edit to index.astro? That's the file. And I have three choices. I can either say yes by clicking or pressing 1, 2, saying yes, allow all edits this session, or 3, I could say no. And finally, I could also say, tell Claude what to do instead. JK, please don't do this. And so because of this, it's going to say no changes made, and I will not have actually gone through the request. Obviously, most of the time we don't actually do that. We don't actually make that third, or rather we don't click that fourth one. As you see, it's also kind of annoying. But generally speaking, if you guys are working in a code base that is, really high risk, sort of high reward thing, where like every change needs to be good or it's going to screw everything up, you can use ask before edits. I should note that very few people are nowadays. We moved away from ask before edits. Most people now use either the next setting them to show you, or they just bypass permissions like me entirely. The next major setting is accept edits. In accept edits, what we do is we auto accept any edits to files. But then if you want to create new files, it'll still ask you for it. And so going back to our little Claude Code page here, we move from ask before edits to edit automatically. Okay, we can now edit any pre-existing files. So what we can do is we could say, sorry, I actually want you to do this. Update the project to the title. And because we've selected edit automatically instead of ask before edits, it'll actually go through and it'll automatically update that for me. See how there was no little panel on the right-hand side? So this is useful when you want to give the model like carte blanche control over any pre-existing files, but you don't want it to like have any control or any ability to make new ones. So I'm just going to say revert the change. And keep in mind that now, because we're in edit automatically, it can do so without actually having to pop. The next one is don't ask. Now, there's no don't ask permission prompt explicitly set up here. So if you want to get to your permissions, you actually have to go /permissions and then continue in a terminal. This is going to open up a new page for you that's going to then pump in Claude with some permissions tab. And then you're going to get a list of all of the different permissions that you can have, including rules in this workspace. So as you can see, we have allow, ask, deny, workspace. Okay, so this is equivalent to our edit all tab. Deny will always reject requests to use any tools. Ask will always ask for confirmation before using tools. Then allow won't ask before using any. What's cool is you also have the ability to add a new rule. So permission rules are basically where you give it the name of a tool, and then you either allow it to use the tool or you force it to ask you for permissions before using a tool. That obviously takes us to that logical question. Well, what are tools, Nick? We haven't talked about them. Well, there are a variety of different ones that Claude Code could use. There's stuff like the ability to fetch things from the web. There's stuff like bash, which is the ability to write like terminal commands and whatnot. And, the purpose of this course is not to go through every single one of